The air in Willow Creek suburbia, Illinois, always felt a little too still, a little too perfect. Lately, though, it was starting to feel suffocating. Began with Mark. He'd always been my rock, my steady guy, but lately he was distant, flinching at loud noises, checking his phone with a furrowed brow, even when he was sitting right next to me. He'd brush it off, say it was work stress, but I knew Mark. This was different. This was a tremor beneath the surface, a quiet unease that settled in his eyes. Then there was Sarah, my husband's sister. She'd always been a bit of a drama queen, but this felt pointed. It started with little digs, veiled comments that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Eleanor, you're so..." about the kids. "It's almost overwhelming sometimes." Or with a saccharine smile, "Are you sure you're getting enough sleep, honey? You seem a little frayed around the edges." Frayed. I was running on fumes, yes, but I was doing it for my babies, Emily and David. I was a good mom. I knew I was. But Sarah's words, like tiny, sharp thorns, began to prick at my confidence. She'd say them when Mark was around. Her voice laced with a fake concern that made my stomach churn. He'd look at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze, and then he'd look away. Was he starting to believe her? Was he seeing the frayed edges she kept talking about? The thought was a cold dread that snaked its way through me. This perfect suburban bubble was starting to feel like a trap, and I was beginning to doubt my own grip on reality. The whispers had begun, and they were chilling. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were usually my quietest days. Mark was on a business trip to Chicago, staying at the Sterling Heights Hotel, and the kids were at school. I'd planned on tackling the laundry mountain and maybe, just maybe, catching up on that book I'd been meaning to read for months. But then the phone rang, and it was Carol, a friend from Emily's soccer league. Her voice was tight, laced with that kind of hesitant sympathy that always means bad news. "Eleanor," she started, her tone all wrong. I just wanted to check in. Everything okay?" "Yeah, Carol, everything's fine." "Why wouldn't it be?" I asked, already feeling that familiar knot of dread tightening in my stomach. There was a pause, a nervous little cough. "Well, it's just... heard something. From Sarah, actually. She was at the grocery store yesterday and she seemed really worried about you." My blood ran cold. Sarah. Course it was Sarah. Worried about me. What did she say? "Oh, nothing specific really," Carol said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Just, Sarah. She's so dramatic. She said she was concerned about your stress levels. Mentioned you seemed a bit overwhelmed lately, and that maybe you weren't handling things as well as you should be." Handling what? Being a mom. Being a wife. Keeping my sanity intact while my husband was becoming a stranger and my sister-in-law was circling like a shark. Overwhelmed. I echoed, my voice dangerously calm. "I'm a mom, Carol. Course I get overwhelmed sometimes. Who doesn't?" I know," Carol rushed to say. But Sarah made it sound different. "You were, I don't know, losing it a little. She even hinted that maybe you weren't fit to be making all the decisions right now. Especially about the kids." The words hit me like a physical blow. Unfit. Sarah had the nerve to suggest I was unfit. My babies, Emily and David, were my entire world. I lived and breathed for them. The thought of Sarah, with her perfectly coiffed hair and her sharp, judgmental eyes, trying to paint me as some kind of unstable mess was beyond infuriating. It was terrifying. "She said that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Eleanor, I don't want to cause trouble," Carol stammered. "But I felt like you needed to know what she was saying. She's been talking to a few people apparently. Even mentioned something about talking to Mark's parents." Mark's parents. The Vance family estate in Lake Geneva felt like a fortress of old money and judgment. If Sarah was poisoning their minds too, I was truly screwed. This wasn't just casual gossip anymore. This was a calculated attack. Sarah was systematically dismantling my reputation, brick by poisonous brick, and I was trapped in Willow Creek, watching it happen. Later that day, I saw Brenda from my book club at the park. She usually had a warm smile and a friendly word, But today, her eyes flickered away when I met her gaze. She held her coffee cup like a shield. "Hi, Eleanor," she said, her voice a little too bright. "How are the kids?" "They're great, Brenda. Emily's really excited about her upcoming ballet recital." I tried to keep my tone light, normal. Brenda nodded, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's nice. You know, Sarah was telling me the other day. She's really worried about you. Said you've been under a lot of pressure. She's such a good sister-in-law, always looking out for everyone." There it was again. Sarah, the selfless angel, concerned for my fragile mental state. But Brenda's carefully neutral tone, the way she avoided my eyes, told me everything I needed to know. Sarah had been busy. She'd been working her magic, spreading her lies through our tight-knit suburban circle like a fast-spreading virus. She was making me out to be the crazy one, the unstable mother who couldn't cope. And the worst part, Mark was away, and his parents were probably lapping up Sarah's every word. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't just about a few nasty rumors. This was about my children. This was about my life. And Sarah was determined to take it all away. The air in Willow Creek suddenly felt thick, suffocating, and I knew with a chilling certainty that this was just the beginning. The silence in the house used to be a comfort. Now it was a deafening roar. Mark was gone, off to Chicago for another one of his endless business trips. The Sterling Heights Hotel, he'd called it. A place of sleek chrome and hushed efficiency. It felt a million miles away from the suffocating reality of Willow Creek suburbia. Sarah's words, amplified by Carol and Brenda, echoed in the empty rooms. Overwhelmed. Not handling things. Losing it a little. Each phrase was a tiny shard of glass working its way under my skin. I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, searching for the frayed edges Sarah so casually pointed out. Was I really falling apart? I ran my fingers over my temples, feeling the faint throb of a headache that had become my constant companion. The kids, Emily and David, were my anchors, their innocent laughter a temporary reprieve from the storm brewing inside me. But even their presence felt precarious, like a delicate ecosystem threatened by an invasive species. That night, after the kids were asleep, I dug out a dusty old notebook from the back of my closet. It was a thick, leather-bound journal, a relic from my college days, filled with sketches and ideas that felt like they belonged to a different person. Now it would serve a new purpose. I opened it to a fresh page, the paper yellowed and slightly brittle. My hand trembled as I uncapped a pen. The date felt heavy, significant. I paused, the pen hovering over the page. The questions swirled in my head, a frantic, buzzing swarm. I wrote down every conversation, every odd look, every veiled insult Sarah had thrown my way. I documented Carol's hesitant call, Brenda's averted gaze, the way Mrs. Henderson from down the street had suddenly stopped waving. It felt like building a fortress, brick by painstaking brick, against an unseen enemy. Sleep offered little escape. My dreams were a jumbled mess of Sarah's sneering face, the kids crying, and Mark's distant, uncomprehending eyes. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the phantom weight of Sarah's accusations pressing down on me. The house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Was she watching? Was she listening? The paranoia was a creeping vine, its tendrils wrapping around my thoughts, constricting my breathing. I started checking the locks multiple times before bed. I'd jump at the sound of the doorbell, my heart leaping into my throat. Even the familiar streets of Willow Creek suburbia felt alien. Every passing car a potential threat, every neighbor's smile a mask. I began to feel like I was living in a distorted reality, a warped funhouse mirror reflecting a version of myself that was unrecognizable. Sarah was the puppeteer, and I was her marionette, my strings being pulled by her insidious whispers. Mark was away, blissfully unaware, or perhaps willfully ignorant. His parents, the formidable Vance family, would undoubtedly side with Sarah, their precious family name untarnished. I flipped through the journal, my handwriting growing more frantic, more desperate. The words spilled out raw and unfiltered. The journal was my only confidant, the only place I could admit the terrifying truth. I was losing my grip, and Sarah was the architect of my descent. The silence of the house was no longer just empty. It was pregnant with unspoken threats, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The quiet of Willow Creek suburbia had turned into a suffocating blanket. Mark was still in Chicago, his calls becoming shorter, more distracted. Each time he mentioned the Sterling Heights Hotel, I pictured him in some sterile, impersonal world, a million miles from the rot that was spreading through my own life. Sarah's whispers, carried by Carol and Brenda, were no longer just rumors. They felt like poison seeping into every corner of my existence. Overwhelmed. Not handling things. Losing it a little. The words played on repeat in my head, a broken record of my own supposed unraveling. I'd catch my reflection in windows, in the polished surface of the kitchen counter, searching for the cracks Sarah so readily pointed out. Was I really that fragile? The headache was a constant thrum behind my eyes, a physical manifestation of the stress. Emily and David, my sweet kids, were the only light in the growing darkness, their innocent chatter a temporary shield. But even their presence felt fragile, like I could shatter them with my own instability. That night, after tucking the kids into bed, the silence of the house felt different. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was charged, buzzing with unspoken threats. The worn leather-bound journal, a relic from my college days, sat on my nightstand. I'd started filling its pages with every snide remark, every veiled accusation Sarah had tossed my way. It was a desperate attempt to create order out of the chaos, to build a case against her, even if it was just in my own mind. But as I reread my frantic scribbles, a cold dread washed over me. This wasn't just about gossip anymore. Sarah wasn't just trying to make me look bad. She was systematically dismantling me. She wanted my children. The thought sent a jolt of pure, primal fear through me. I couldn't just sit here and let it happen. Mark was gone. His parents were likely being fed the same lies, and my friends were either too scared or too naive to see the truth. I was alone, fighting a war I hadn't even realized had started. The paranoia was a constant companion, a cold knot in my stomach. Every creak of the house, every car that drove by, made me jump. I found myself double-checking the locks, peering through the peephole before answering the door. The familiar streets of Willow Creek suburbia felt alien, hostile. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. Not just my frantic journal entries, but something tangible. Something Sarah couldn't spin or deny. My mind raced, sifting through possibilities. How could I catch her? How could I make her reveal the true depth of her malice? Then an idea, sharp and clear, cut through the fog of my fear. Recording. The next morning I drove to a small electronics store on the other side of town, a place I'd never been before. I felt like I was in a spy movie, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked up to the counter, trying to appear casual, like I was just browsing. "I'm looking for a small voice recorder," I said, my voice a little too tight. "Something discreet." No. The clerk, a bored-looking teenager, barely glanced up as he pointed to a display case. There they were, tiny, sleek, almost invisible. I picked one out, a simple digital voice recorder, no bigger than my thumb. It felt cold and heavy in my palm, a weapon disguised as a gadget. Back home, I hid it in my purse, the weight of it a constant reminder of the dangerous game I was about to play. I knew I had to be smart. I couldn't just confront her. I had to lure her into a false sense of security, make her think she was winning, make her careless. I needed her to confess, to lay bare her entire rotten plan. The thought of facing her, of hearing the venom spill from her lips, made my stomach churn. But the image of Emily and David's faces, their innocent trust, pushed me forward. I would do whatever it took to protect them. This was no longer about saving myself. It was about saving my children. And for that I would risk everything. The recorder felt like a lifeline, a tiny beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. It was time to fight back. The little digital voice recorder felt like a stone in my purse, heavy and cold. I'd tucked it away the night before, the click of its tiny button a sound that echoed in the hollow spaces of my fear. Today was the day. The plan was simple, or as simple as anything involving Sarah could ever be. I'd invited her over to my place in Willow Creek suburbia. A casual lunch I'd set on the phone, just the two of us to talk things through. Mark was still out of town, his absence a gaping hole that Sarah was all too eager to fill with her poison. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I practiced my lines in the car, the words feeling hollow and fake. I just want us to get along, Sarah. I feel like there's been a misunderstanding. Lies. All of it. But sometimes you had to play their game, even if it meant getting your hands dirty. She arrived an hour later, looking as polished and put together as ever. Her smile was a little too bright, her eyes a little too sharp. She'd brought a bottle of wine, a peace offering that felt more like a weapon. "Eleanor, honey, you look a little stressed," she said, her voice dripping with false concern as she surveyed my living room. "Are you sure you're okay? Mark worries about you." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Sarah. Just busy. You know how it is with the kids." I gestured towards the kitchen. "Lunch is almost ready. Why don't you have a seat?" As we ate, I steered the conversation carefully. I brought up the rumors, the things Carol and Brenda had let slip. I pretended to be confused, hurt, seeking answers. Sarah, bless her overconfident heart, lapped it up. She saw my vulnerability, my supposed unraveling, and it made her bold. Too bold. "Honestly, Eleanor," she said, swirling her wine, "it's for the best. You're just not cut out for this. Not anymore. The kids need stability, and frankly, you're not providing it." My hands clenched under the table, the tiny recorder a reassuring weight against my thigh. I kept my voice steady, a tightrope walker balancing over a chasm. "What do you mean, Sarah? What are you saying?" She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a triumphant cruelty. "I mean, I'm the one who can give them what they need. Mark's parents agree. They see it too. You're unraveling, Eleanor. You're losing it. I've been helping things along." My breath hitched. This was it. The confession. Helping things along. I repeated, my voice a low whisper. "What have you done, Sarah?" She laughed, a brittle, unpleasant sound. "Oh, Eleanor. You really are clueless. I've been talking to everyone. Your friends, Mark's family, even some people at the school. I've been painting a picture. A very clear picture. The stressed-out mom, the one who can't cope. It's all about perception, you see. And I've been very careful with mine. I'm the stable one. The responsible one. The one who deserves to have Emily and David." She took a long sip of her wine, savoring the moment, oblivious to the tiny red light blinking discreetly in my purse. It was so easy. Just a few well-placed words here and there. A little nudge here, a little whisper there. People believe what they want to believe. And everyone wants to believe that Sarah Jenkins is the perfect aunt, the perfect sister-in-law, ready to step in when the weak one falters. Her voice was a venomous hiss now, the facade of concern completely gone. "Mark's parents are already talking to lawyers. They're looking at ways to get you out of the picture. Permanently. And when it's all said and done, those kids will be mine. They'll be safe. With me. Where they belong." I stared at her, the woman I'd called family, the woman who had systematically tried to destroy me. The raw hatred in her eyes, the sheer calculation behind her words, was more terrifying than any of the rumors. But beneath the terror, a cold, hard resolve began to form. Had it. I had the proof. And Sarah Jenkins was about to find out just how wrong she was about who was truly unraveling. The drive back to Willow Creek suburbia was a blur. Sarah's words, a chilling symphony of malice, replayed in my head, each syllable a fresh stab wound. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, trying to process the sheer, unadulterated evil that had just spilled out of her mouth. She hadn't just spread rumors. She'd orchestrated a full-blown smear campaign, a calculated assault designed to rip my children from me. The thought of Emily and David, my innocent babies, being taken from me because of this. This viper made my stomach clench with a nausea so profound it felt physical. Back in my house, the silence was deafening. The kids were at Carol's for the afternoon, a prearranged playdate that now felt like a lifeline thrown to me. I locked the door, double-checked the windows, a primal fear taking root. Sarah was a monster, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and I had let her into my home, into my life. I pulled the small digital voice recorder from my purse. It felt impossibly small, a tiny piece of plastic holding the weight of my world. My hands trembled as I pressed play. Her voice, so sweet and concerned just moments ago, now dripped with a venom I'd only suspected. "You're unraveling, Eleanor. You're losing it." The words echoed in the empty living room, each one a confirmation of my worst fears, but also, strangely, a source of power. She admitted it all. Talking to friends, Mark's family, the school. Painting a picture. Picture twisted and distorted by her envy. "It's all about perception," she'd purred, her voice laced with smug satisfaction. "And I've been very careful with mine." I listened again and again. The raw hatred in her tone, the gleeful confession of manipulating everyone, even Mark's parents, sent shivers down my spine. She wanted my children. She saw them as hers for the taking, a prize she deserved more than me. The sheer audacity of it, the calculated cruelty, was breathtaking. She thought she had me. She thought she had won. But she was wrong. So wrong. This recording wasn't just proof. It was my weapon. It was the undeniable truth against her carefully constructed lies. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my gut, pushing aside the panic. Sarah had underestimated me. She'd seen a woman on the verge of collapse, not a mother fighting for her life. She'd played her hand, and now it was my turn. I replayed the part where she mentioned lawyers, where she boasted about Mark's parents agreeing with her. It was all there. Her plan, her motives, her confession. The paranoia that had been my constant companion for weeks began to recede, replaced by a fierce, protective anger. I wouldn't let her win. Couldn't. Emily and David deserved better. They deserved their mother. And I would fight tooth and nail to give them that. The tiny recorder, once a symbol of my fear, now felt like a beacon of hope. The game had changed. The drive to the Sterling Heights Hotel felt like an eternity. Each red light was a taunt, each slow-moving car a personal insult. I clutched the digital voice recorder in my purse, its small weight a constant, almost unbearable reminder of Sarah's venom. I'd called Mark, told him I needed to see him, urgently. He'd sounded tired, distracted, but agreed to meet. He was due back in Chicago for a conference, and this hotel was his usual base camp. I pictured him walking into the lobby. His tie loosened, that familiar crease between his brows. He was a good man, a decent man. He loved his kids. He loved me. Or at least he used to. Now I wasn't so sure. I found him in the hotel bar, nursing a whiskey. He looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper. He stood up when he saw me, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Ellie, what's wrong? You sounded frantic on the phone." I sat down opposite him, my hands shaking. I didn't know where to start. The words Sarah had spoken, the sheer coldness of her confession, felt too monstrous to put into words. "Mark," I began, my voice raspy, I need to show you something." He raised an eyebrow, taking another sip of his drink. "Okay. What is it?" I fumbled in my purse, my fingers clumsy with nerves. I pulled out the recorder. It looked so small, so insignificant against the polished wood of the bar. I recorded Sarah. His expression shifted. The concern was replaced by a guarded confusion. "You recorded Sarah. Why?" "Because she's lying, Mark. She's been lying about me. To everyone. To you, to your parents, to people at the kids' school. She's been trying to turn everyone against me." My voice cracked. "She wants the kids, Mark. She admitted it. She admitted everything." I pressed play. Sarah's voice, so sweet and innocent on the phone, now dripped with malice. "You're unraveling, Eleanor. You're losing it." Mark's eyes widened. He leaned closer, his gaze fixed on the small device. Sarah's voice continued, detailing her lies, her manipulations, her smug satisfaction. "It's all about perception, you see. And I've been very careful with mine." As the recording played, Mark's face went from confusion to disbelief, then to something akin to horror. He kept shaking his head, as if trying to dislodge the words. "No. That's not Sarah. She wouldn't. She couldn't." "She did, Mark," I whispered, tears finally spilling over. "She admitted she's been talking to your parents, to lawyers. She wants Emily and David. She thinks I'm not good enough." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain I'd never seen before. He was torn. Could see it. The loyalty to his sister, the sister he'd known his whole life, warring with the undeniable truth coming from the recorder. "Ellie, this is insane. Sarah's my sister. She loves those kids. She wouldn't do this." "She did," I repeated, my voice firm now, fueled by a desperate certainty. "Listen to her. She admits it all. She's been poisoning everyone against me." He ran a hand through his hair, looking utterly lost. I don't know what to believe. This is lot. I need to think." He wouldn't meet my eyes. The rift had begun, a chasm opening between us, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. He stood up, his movements stiff. "I have to go, Ellie. This is too much." He left me there, alone in the sterile hotel bar, the echo of Sarah's confession and Mark's disbelief hanging heavy in the air. The silence in my car was a thick, suffocating blanket. Mark's words, or rather his lack of them, echoed louder than any argument. "I need to think." It was a polite dismissal, a way to shut me down without actually saying I was wrong. He'd left me in that hotel bar, the sterile air suddenly feeling charged with his disbelief. He thought I was crazy, or at least desperate enough to make things up. Sarah had won that round, and the victory tasted like ash in my mouth. I drove home on autopilot, the familiar streets of Willow Creek blurring past my window. The kids were still at Carol's, a mercy I clung to. I needed time to breathe, to figure out my next move. The recording was my only weapon, and Mark had just brushed it aside like a child's tantrum. That's when the real fear kicked in. If Mark wouldn't believe me, who would? The next few days were a blur of forced smiles and hollow reassurances for Emily and David. I tried to act normal, but a cold dread had settled deep in my bones. Then the official-looking envelope arrived. It had the letterhead of a law firm I'd never heard of, one that specialized in family law. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a summons. Sarah had filed for custody. My stomach plummeted. This was it. She wasn't just spreading rumors anymore. She was making a legal move. The papers were filled with the same garbage she'd been feeding everyone. Allegations of neglect, of emotional instability, of me being unfit. There were affidavits from people I barely knew, people Sarah had clearly coached, twisting innocent interactions into damning evidence. One mentioned a time I'd been stressed about work and snapped at David, framing it as abusive behavior. Another twisted my anxiety about Sarah's interference into proof of my paranoia. It was all lies, carefully crafted and presented as fact. I reread the documents, a cold fury building inside me. She had fabricated so much, twisted so many innocent moments into weapons. She'd even gotten some of Mark's distant relatives, people who barely knew me, to sign statements. They were pawns in her game, manipulated by her charm and her venomous whispers. It was a calculated, brutal attack, designed to dismantle me piece by piece. She was using the legal system, a system meant to protect families, as her personal weapon. Panic threatened to consume me. How could I fight this? How could I defend myself against a manufactured reality? The recording was damning, but I knew Sarah's lawyer would try to discredit it, claim it was edited or taken out of context. Mark's disbelief was a heavy weight, a sign that my own husband was already leaning towards his sister's version of events. Sarah was playing dirty and she was playing to win. She had the advantage of surprise, of well-placed lies. And now, the weight of the law itself. I felt like I was drowning, the carefully constructed facade of my life crumbling around me. And Sarah Jenkins was the wrecking ball. I looked at the crayon drawing Emily had made for me, taped to the fridge, and a fierce primal instinct surged through me. I wouldn't let her have my children. Couldn't. This was war. The summons sat on my kitchen counter like a venomous snake, coiled and ready to strike. Each word on the crisp paper felt like a fresh wound. Sarah had gone legal. My stomach churned with a mix of pure terror and a cold, hard rage. Mark's silence, his "I need to think," had paved the way for this. He hadn't defended me, hadn't even truly heard me. I knew I couldn't fight this alone, not against Sarah's calculated lies and the legal system she was weaponizing. I needed someone who understood the law, someone who could see through Sarah's manufactured reality. My fingers, still a little shaky, dialed the number I'd found online for a local family law attorney. A woman's voice, sharp and professional, answered on the third ring. "Miss Albright's office, how can I help you?" I need to see Miss Albright. Urgently," I stammered, the words catching in my throat. "It's about a custody case." After a brief, almost too quick consultation over the phone, I was given an appointment for the next afternoon. The drive to the law office, located in a modern glass-fronted building in a part of Willow Creek I rarely visited, felt like a journey to a foreign land. Inside, the air was hushed, smelling faintly of expensive paper and quiet desperation. Albright was exactly as I'd imagined. Sharp suit, no-nonsense haircut, and eyes that missed nothing. She listened intently as I laid out the entire sordid mess, my voice trembling at times, then hardening with resolve. I told her about Sarah's jealousy, her lies, her systematic campaign to make me look unstable. I explained how Mark had dismissed the recording, how he seemed to be siding with his sister. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful but guarded. "Eleanor," she began, her tone measured, "what you have is compelling. Sarah's confession on that recording is certainly damning." She paused, tapping a pen against her notepad. "However, the law can be tricky. A recording like that, made without the other party's knowledge, might be challenged. They could argue it was illegally obtained or worse, edited. It's not always admissible evidence, especially in a high-conflict custody battle." My heart sank. "But it's the truth." She admitted everything. "I understand, Miss Albright said, her gaze steady. "And we will certainly try to use it. But we can't rely on it solely. We need more. We need to build a solid case that shows Sarah is fabricating these allegations, that she's motivated by malice, not by concern for your children. We need to prove her claims are false, and that you are, unequivocally, a fit mother." She continued. "This means gathering more proof. Witness statements from people who can attest to your stability, your parenting. We need to show Sarah's history of manipulation, if possible. We'll need to thoroughly investigate the claims she's made in her filings. We'll also need to prepare for the possibility that Mark might be called to testify, and his testimony could be difficult." She looked at me directly. "This is going to be a tough fight, Eleanor. Sarah has the advantage of initiating the legal action, and she's clearly prepared. We need to be smarter, more thorough, and present an irrefutable picture of your life and your capabilities as a mother." The weight of her words pressed down on me. It wasn't just about playing Sarah's recording anymore. This was a real legal war, and I was starting at a disadvantage. I clutched a small, worn leather-bound journal in my lap, the only tangible proof of Sarah's deceit that might actually hold up in court. The meeting with Ms. Albright had left me feeling both more hopeful and more terrified. She'd laid out the battlefield, and it was clearer than ever that Sarah had the upper hand, at least initially. I left her office with a stack of papers and a knot of dread in my stomach, the worn leather-bound journal clutched tight in my hand. The drive back to Willow Creek suburbia felt longer than usual. I needed to process, to figure out how to gather more ammunition, as Ms. Albright put it. A few days later, the phone rang, jarring me out of a daze of worry. It was a man's voice, calm and steady, identifying himself as Detective Miller. He said he was with the Willow Creek Police Department and that he was following up on a complaint filed by Sarah Jenkins. Complaint? Against me. My blood ran cold. A complaint, detective? I managed, my voice a little shaky. About what? Something about harassment, ma'am, he replied. His tone professional but not unfriendly. She claims you've been making her life difficult. Said you've been calling her, showing up at her place, that sort of thing. Harassment. That was rich, coming from Sarah. I wanted to laugh, but the situation was too serious. I knew Sarah was trying to paint me as the unstable one, the aggressor. This was just another move in her twisted game. Detective, I started, trying to keep my voice even. I haven't harassed Sarah. In fact, she's the one who's been creating a lot of problems. There was a slight pause on his end. Miss Jenkins filed a formal complaint, ma'am. We have to look into it. Can you come down to the station to give your statement? I knew I had to. This was a chance, however small, to get my side of the story out there to someone official. I agreed to meet him that afternoon at the police station, a place I'd only ever visited for minor traffic violations. The station was small, smelling faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. Detective Miller was older, maybe in his late 50s, with tired eyes that seemed to have seen too much. He wasn't like the hotshot lawyers or the polished executives I'd encountered lately. He looked like a regular guy, but there was a sharpness to his gaze that made me nervous. He sat me down in a small, sterile room and started asking questions, his voice low and even. He listened patiently as I explained Sarah's lies, her campaign to turn everyone against me, her desire to take my kids. I didn't mention the recording directly, not yet. I was afraid of how it might sound, of it being dismissed as hearsay. But I hinted at it, at Sarah's own words that proved her malicious intent. As I spoke, I watched his face. He didn't interrupt much, just nodded occasionally, his eyes never leaving mine. He asked a few probing questions about Sarah's motivations, about my relationship with Mark, about the children. He seemed to be piecing things together, not just taking Sarah's complaint at face value. When I finished, he leaned back, tapping a pen against his notepad. Soames, Jenkins claims you're harassing her, but you're saying she's the one making false accusations and trying to get your kids. That's right, detective, I said, my voice firm. She's been lying about me for months. This complaint is just another way to make me look bad. He looked at me for a long moment, a thoughtful expression on his face. I've dealt with a lot of domestic disputes, Eleanor. A lot of family stuff. Sometimes what looks like a simple complaint. It's just the tip of the iceberg. He paused, then added, Sarah's story. It's got some holes in it. We'll be looking into it further. It wasn't a promise, but it was more than I'd expected. For the first time in days, a sliver of something other than dread pierced through the fog. Maybe, just maybe, someone was starting to see through Sarah's act. The air in the Vance family estate felt thick, heavy with generations of unspoken expectations and a suffocating sense of entitlement. It was a place I'd always dreaded, a monument to the old money that seemed to judge every breath I took. Today, though, dread was a luxury I couldn't afford. My attorney, Albright, sat beside me, a picture of calm professionalism, her presence a much-needed anchor. Across from us, in the opulent living room that felt more like a museum, sat Mark's parents, Evelyn and Robert Vance. Evelyn, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and eyes like chips of ice, exuded a quiet disapproval that could freeze lava. Robert, a man of few words but immense presence, simply watched, his face unreadable. And then there was Sarah, perched on the edge of a velvet armchair, a smug, self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She looked like a perfectly innocent angel, a stark contrast to the viper I knew her to be. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Ms. Albright began, her voice smooth and even, cutting through the tense silence. Eleanor has asked me to represent her in this difficult family matter. Evelyn's gaze flickered to Sarah, then back to Ms. Albright, a silent question hanging in the air. Difficult is an understatement, Ms. Albright. Sarah has shared some deeply concerning information about Eleanor's state of mind. My jaw tightened. My state of mind is perfectly fine, Evelyn. It's Sarah who's been busy creating problems. Sarah let out a small, delicate laugh. Oh, Eleanor, you're still so dramatic. It's for your own good and the children's. We're just worried about you. Worried enough to file a lawsuit and try to take my kids. I shot back, the words laced with the raw anger I'd been holding back. Robert finally spoke. His voice a low rumble. Eleanor, this is not the place for accusations. We're here to understand what's happening. Miss Albright held up a hand, a subtle gesture that commanded attention. With your permission, Mr. and Mrs. Vance, I'd like to play a recording. It might shed some light on the situation. Sarah's smirk faltered for a split second, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Evelyn raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. A recording. Of what? Of Sarah, I said, my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. Albright discreetly pulled a small, discreet device from her briefcase. It wasn't the digital recorder I'd used, but a professional playback unit. She pressed play. Sarah's voice, the one I'd heard countless times, but now stripped of its usual sweetness, filled the room. It was cold, calculating, and utterly damning. She spoke of her jealousy, her plan to make me look crazy, her determination to get custody of Emily and David. She detailed how she'd twisted Mark's words, how she'd manipulated his parents, how she'd spread lies like wildfire. Each word was a fresh stab, but this time it was Sarah who was bleeding. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn's face had gone pale, her icy gaze now fixed on her daughter with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Robert's jaw was clenched. His eyes narrowed in a way I'd never seen before. Sarah, however, looked like she'd been physically struck. Her carefully constructed mask had shattered, revealing the ugly, venomous truth beneath. She stammered. That's not real. It's been edited. She twisted my words. No, Sarah, I said, my voice low and firm, meeting her panicked gaze. That's you. That's the truth you tried so hard to bury. Evelyn stood up, her movements stiff. I need a moment. She turned and walked out of the room, Robert following close behind, his expression grim. Sarah was left alone with me and Ms. Albright, her face a mask of terror and shame. The seismic shockwave had hit, and the Vance family estate would never feel the same again. The carefully crafted facade had crumbled, and the truth, ugly and undeniable, had finally come to light. The air in the Vance family estate still felt thick, but now it was a different kind of heavy. It wasn't just the weight of old money and unspoken judgments. It was the suffocating smell of exposure. Sarah was a wreck, her carefully put-together image completely shattered. Evelyn and Robert, her parents, had practically fled the room, leaving me and Ms. Albright to deal with the fallout. Sarah was stammering, her face pale, trying to spin some tale about the recording being fake, edited, anything but the truth. But the truth, once it's out, has a way of sticking. No, Sarah, I said, my voice low, but it echoed in the sudden quiet. That's you. That's what you really think, what you've been doing. Miss Albright gave me a subtle nod, her eyes sharp and assessing. She knew this was a turning point, but she also knew the fight wasn't over. Sarah was cornered, and cornered animals can be dangerous. After that disastrous family meeting, things started moving faster. Albright worked her magic, and the recording, along with my journal entries, became the bedrock of our defense. It wasn't just about proving Sarah wrong anymore. It was about showing the whole ugly picture of her manipulation. But the real game changer came from an unexpected place. Detective Miller. He called me a few days later. His voice still that same calm, steady tone. He wasn't calling about Sarah's complaint anymore. He was calling because he'd been doing his own digging. Miss Vance, he said, and I automatically flinched at the formality. I've been looking into some of the things you mentioned. Specifically about Sarah's financial situation and some recent, unusual transactions. My heart leaped. I hadn't even hinted at that to him. I'd been so focused on the custody battle, on proving I wasn't crazy, that I'd almost forgotten about the money angle. Ms. Albright had pointed out. Sarah had been awfully flush with cash lately, despite not having a steady job. What kind of transactions? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Well, Miller continued, and I could hear him flipping through papers on his end. It seems she's been making some pretty large withdrawals from an account that's not entirely hers. An account linked to a business Mark was involved in before he got married. My breath caught. Mark's old business. The one he'd sold off years ago, before Emily was even born. Sarah had always been jealous of his success, of our life. Had she been siphoning money? Was this part of her plan to make me look unstable, to control Mark's assets? And, Miller added, his voice dropping slightly, we've also found some discrepancies in the timeline of events she reported to us. Things don't quite add up. It looks like she's been actively trying to mislead us. This was huge. Detective Miller wasn't just taking Sarah's word for it anymore. He was seeing the cracks in her story, the same cracks I'd been screaming about. He was doing his own investigation, and he was finding evidence that Sarah was lying, not just to me and my family but to the police. So, what does this mean, Detective? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. It means we're taking a much closer look at Ms. Jenkins's complaint, he said, his tone firm. And we're looking into her activities as well. I'll be in touch. The call ended, and I sat there stunned. It felt like the first real breath of fresh air I'd taken in months. Sarah's perfect little world, built on lies and manipulation, was starting to crumble. The legal battle was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just fighting for my children. I was fighting for the truth. And the truth, it seemed, was finally starting to show its face. The weight of it all was still immense, but now it felt like a weight I could actually carry. I looked down at the worn leather-bound journal on the table, its pages filled with my fear and my fight. It was a testament to how far I'd come, and how much further I still had to go. The game was changing, and Sarah was no longer in control. The call from Detective Miller had been a lifeline, a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. Sarah's carefully constructed world was starting to crack, and for the first time I felt like I could breathe. But cornered animals, as my lawyer Ms. Albright had warned, are dangerous. And Sarah was definitely cornered. A few days later the air felt different. Not just heavy with the lingering tension from the Vance estate meeting, but charged, electric. I'd taken the kids to Blackwood Forest Preserve, a place we loved for its quiet trails and the way the sunlight dappled through the ancient oaks. It was a sanctuary, a place where the ugliness of Sarah's schemes felt miles away. Emily, always observant, was collecting fallen leaves, her small brow furrowed in concentration. David, his bright red jacket a beacon against the green, was chasing a squirrel with gleeful abandon. I watched them, a fierce protectiveness swelling in my chest. This was what I was fighting for. As I knelt to help Emily identify a particularly vibrant maple leaf, a twig snapped behind me. My head whipped around, my heart leaping into my throat. 'Twas Sarah. She stood at the edge of the clearing, her usual polished appearance a little disheveled, her eyes wild and unfocused. She clutched a small, half-empty bottle of prescription medication in her hand. It wasn't mine. It was Mark's, the ones he took for his migraines. A cold dread washed over me. "Eleanor," she hissed, her voice raspy, uncharacteristic. The sweetness was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate edge. "We need to talk. Alone." "Sarah, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice tight. I instinctively moved closer to the kids, shielding them with my body. "And what are you doing with Mark's medication?" Her gaze flickered to the bottle, then back to me, A flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Fear, rage, maybe even a twisted kind of regret. It's for you, Eleanor. To help you. To make you calm. Calm. I scoffed, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. You think drugging me is going to help? You've already done enough damage. You don't understand, she pleaded, taking a step forward. Her eyes were wide, manic. They're going to take everything. The recording, the police. They know. They know what you've done. What done? I stood up, my own anger starting to simmer. You're the one who's been lying, Sarah. You're the one who tried to ruin my life. David, sensing the shift in my tone, stopped chasing the squirrel and ran to my side, clutching my leg. Emily, her eyes wide with alarm, dropped her leaves and moved closer too. You're crazy, Eleanor, Sarah spat, her voice rising. You're unstable. You can't handle this. You never could. She took another step, then another, closing the distance between us. The bottle of pills was still in her hand. This is the only way. For the children. For Mark. My mind raced. The recording. Detective Miller. The legal proceedings. Sarah was unraveling, and she was desperate. She saw the truth closing in, and she was willing to do anything to stop it. The primal instinct to protect my children surged through me. A raw, animalistic force. I knew with a chilling certainty what she was planning. Stay away from them, Sarah, I warned, my voice a low growl. The woods, which had felt like a sanctuary moments before, now felt like a trap. The dappled sunlight seemed to mock us, casting long, eerie shadows. The chirping birds and rustling leaves suddenly sounded ominous, a soundtrack to the impending violence. This was it. The point of no return. The desperation that had been building for months was about to explode. The air in Blackwood Forest Preserve had turned from peaceful to suffocating in seconds. Sarah stood there, Mark's pills clutched in her hand, her eyes wide and manic. The sweet, fake smile was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate, animalistic glint. She was a cornered rat, and I knew with a sickening certainty what she was about to do. Stay away from them, Sarah, I warned, my voice a low growl that surprised even me. David, my little guy, was pressed against my leg, his small hands gripping my jeans like a lifeline. Emily, her eyes wide with a fear she was too young to fully understand, was right beside him, a tiny, trembling shadow. Sarah took another step, then another, closing the distance. The bottle of pills, a pale blue plastic thing, looked like a weapon in her hand. You don't understand, Eleanor, she hissed, her voice strained. They're going to take everything. The recording. Please. They know. They know what you've done. What I've done. My own anger, a slow burn for months, finally ignited. I stood taller, pushing David and Emily gently behind me. You're the one who's been lying, Sarah. You're the one who tried to destroy my life, my family. Her face contorted. You're crazy, Eleanor. You're unstable. You can't handle this. You never could. She lunged. Not a shove, not a push, but a full-on desperate attack. She was coming at me, the bottle of pills held out like a club, aiming for my head. Instinct took over. Years of suppressed fear and rage exploded. I shoved Emily and David hard, sending them stumbling a few feet back towards the denser trees. Run! I screamed, my voice raw. Sarah's momentum carried her forward. I sidestepped, the movement born of pure survival. The bottle swung through the air where my head had been. She stumbled, off balance, and I didn't hesitate. I grabbed her wrist, the one holding the pills, and twisted. Hard. The plastic cracked, and pills scattered across the forest floor, tiny white specks against the fallen leaves. Sarah shrieked, a sound of pure animalistic pain and fury. She clawed at my face, her nails raking across my cheek. Blood welled up, hot and stinging. You bitch! She screamed, her voice a guttural roar. She tried to knee me, but I was already moving, fueled by a primal need to protect my children. I shoved her away hard. She tripped over a root, falling backward. Her eyes, wild and unfocused, landed on something behind me. Her expression shifted from rage to pure terror. Before I could turn, I heard the crunch of leaves, the sound of heavy footsteps. Detective Miller. He stood there, his face grim, his eyes taking in the scene, Sarah on the ground, me breathing hard, my face bleeding, Emily and David peeking out from behind a thick oak, their faces pale with shock. Miss Jenkins. Miller's voice was calm, but it cut through the charged air like a knife. What in God's name is going on here? Sarah scrambled to her feet, trying to compose herself, but it was too late. Her carefully constructed facade had completely shattered. Her hair was a mess, her clothes torn, and there was a wildness in her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. "Eleanor attacked me," she blurted out, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She's completely lost it. She tried to kill me." Miller's gaze shifted to me. He saw the blood on my cheek, the tremor in my hands, the sheer terror mixed with fierce determination in my eyes. He'd seen enough to know Sarah was lying. "Is that right, Ms. Vance?" he asked, his tone even. I took a deep breath, trying to control the shaking in my body. "No, detective," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "She attacked me. She came at me with Mark's medication, trying to drug me, trying to hurt me. I was defending myself. I was defending my children." I gestured to Emily and David, who were now clinging to each other, their small bodies shaking. Miller looked from Sarah to me, then down at the scattered pills on the ground. He knelt, picking up one of the small white tablets. "Mark's migraine medication?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Sarah stammered. I was going to help her. "He's not well." "She's not well." Miller stood up, his gaze fixed on Sarah. "Or you're not well, Ms. Jenkins. The financial discrepancies we found, the lies you told us, the evidence of you trying to frame a Miss Vance, it all points to you." He took a step closer to her. "You came here today, armed with pills to silence her, to finish what you started." Sarah's face went ashen. She looked trapped, exposed. The wildness in her eyes was replaced by a dawning horror. She knew she was caught. "This is over, Sarah," Miller said, his voice firm. "You're under arrest." As two other officers who had arrived silently behind Miller stepped forward to take Sarah, I sank to my knees, pulling Emily and David into a fierce hug. They were safe. We were safe. The woods, moments before a terrifying battleground, began to feel like a sanctuary again. The sunlight, filtering through the leaves, no longer felt mocking, but like a warm embrace. The fight had been brutal, visceral, and it had pushed me to my absolute limit. But in the end, my maternal instinct, my fierce, unwavering love for my children, had been stronger than any of Sarah's venom. The truth, ugly and raw, had finally won. The flashing lights of the police cars were a harsh, unwelcome glare against the afternoon sun. Sarah, her face a mask of manufactured innocence that was now cracking under the weight of reality, was being led away. Her eyes, those same eyes that had spewed so much venom, met mine for a fleeting second. There was no remorse, no apology, just a flicker of pure, unadulterated hate. It was a look I'd never forget, a chilling testament to the depths of her depravity. Detective Miller, his expression grim but professional, turned to me. He saw the scratches on my cheek, the tremor in my hands, the raw exhaustion etched onto my face. He saw the two small children clinging to my legs, their eyes wide and still carrying the echo of the terror they'd witnessed. He'd seen enough. The crumpled police report he'd been holding earlier, the one Sarah had likely fabricated, now seemed like a relic of a past life, a life built on lies. "Miss Vance," Miller said, his voice low and steady, cutting through the lingering tension. "We'll need you to come down to the station. Just a few more questions to finalize everything." I nodded, my throat tight. "Of course, detective." I looked down at Emily and David, their small bodies trembling. "But first I need to get these two home. They've been through enough." He understood. A brief nod, and he turned back to his officers, giving quiet instructions. The scene began to dissolve, the flashing lights receding as the police cars pulled away, taking Sarah and the suffocating weight of her lies with them. The walk back through Blackwood Forest Preserve felt different. The dappled sunlight no longer seemed eerie, but warm, a gentle caress on my skin. The birdsong, which had sounded ominous moments before, was now just birdsong, peaceful. My children, still pressed against me, slowly began to relax, their small hands loosening their grip on my jeans. Back home in Willow Creek suburbia, the silence was deafening, yet profoundly welcome. The house, which had felt like a cage during Sarah's reign of terror, now felt like a sanctuary. Mark arrived a few hours later, his face etched with worry. He'd heard bits and pieces, rumors swirling like a storm. Seeing me, seeing the scratches on my face, seeing the haunted look in my children's eyes, the denial finally broke. He held me, his embrace tight, a silent apology for his blindness, his hesitation. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, legal meetings, and quiet moments of recovery. The recording, that damning piece of evidence, was the key. It laid bare Sarah's entire scheme, her envy, her desperation, her calculated cruelty. The financial discrepancies Detective Miller had uncovered, the lies she'd told, all of it painted a clear picture of her guilt. She faced charges, and the legal system, slow but sure, began its work. The Vance family estate, once a symbol of judgment and inherited privilege, became a place of quiet reckoning. Mark's parents, finally seeing the truth, offered their support, a fragile bridge rebuilding over the chasm Sarah had created. There were no immediate happy endings, no magical return to how things were. The scars ran deep. The paranoia, the fear, the feeling of being constantly watched, those lingered. But with each passing day, the grip of that fear loosened. I started going back to my design work, small projects at first, then bigger ones. The creative spark, dulled by months of anxiety, began to rekindle. I found myself sketching again, not out of necessity, but out of a rediscovered joy. I kept a worn leather-bound journal, not to document Sarah's evil anymore, but to record the small victories, the moments of peace. A particularly vibrant sunset, Emily's laughter as she drew a picture of our family, David's excited chatter about a new superhero. These were the moments I was fighting for, the moments that mattered. Mark and I really talked for the first time in what felt like years. We acknowledged the strain Sarah had put on our marriage, the way she had manipulated us both. We were a team again, a stronger team, forged in the fire of betrayal and tested by the fight for our family. The legal proceedings against Sarah were a grim, drawn-out affair. She was convicted, her lies exposed for everyone to see. Justice, in its own imperfect way, was served. But the real victory wasn't in her punishment. It was in reclaiming my own life, my own sanity, my own children. Looking at Emily and David now, their faces bright and full of life, I knew the ordeal had changed me. I was no longer the woman who had been pushed to the brink. I was stronger, fiercer, and more aware of the darkness that can lurk beneath a polished surface. But I was also more appreciative of the light, the love, and the simple, profound beauty of a life reclaimed. The woods had been a battleground, but they had also been the place where the truth finally broke free. And in that truth, there was a quiet, hard-won peace. That's it. If you liked this video, share it with your friends and leave your like. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss more videos like this. Leave your comments saying what you thought of the video and what you would like to see in the next videos. Remembering that we have other videos in this style that you will like to watch, just enter our channel that I guarantee you will like. Until the next video.